In this episode, we predict and break down the Tampa Bay Lightning versus Carolina Hurricanes and Colorado Avalanche versus Vegas Golden Knights series, including suspensions in the NHL. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Morjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Let's get to the second round. First, we'll start in the Central Finals. I guess we're going to call it Central Finals. It is the second round. Joining us to discuss this Tampa Bay Lightning, Carolina Hurricanes series are Erik Erlendsson. He's been covering the Tampa Bay Lightning for 20 years now. You can find him on lightninginsider.com or on Twitter at Erik_Erlendsson. Welcome back to the show, Erik.
Hey, Peter. Good to be with you again, man.
And Andrew Schnittke. He's the managing editor at SB Nation, Canes Country, of course. We'll have all the links to our guests and their Twitter accounts and everything like that on our game notes for this episode. This is Season 6, Episode 25. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at ASCHNITT53. I said it pretty right there, eh, Andrew?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. And 53. Why is it 53? Is it Jeff? Is that like a Jeff Skinner thing?
Yeah. So when I made my Twitter account, I was a freshman in high school when Jeff Skinner was playing for the Hurricanes. So yeah, that was an homage to him.
Yes. What a guess. All right. Not a far stretch, I guess, for me to guess that. All right. So we'll make our picks for this series at the end of this segment. But we'll start with a game one. Just last night, Tampa wins 2-1, a tight game with some solid goaltending until Blake Coleman's game winner at 12:39 of the third period. Alex Nedeljkovic did not look great on that shot, though. I don't know, Andrew, did he kind of lose his post with the right pad and try to lean his shoulder into it and kind of went forward and missed the puck? Or did he kind of anticipate? I'm thinking maybe he was anticipating Coleman shooting high and then he kind of fanned on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are both plausible. I think he just kind of lost his post. And it's just unfortunate because obviously Nedeljkovic has been great for the Hurricanes all postseason, and really that game to that point, especially in the second period when the Lightning kind of pushed back from what the Hurricanes had done in the first period, Nedeljkovic had played a really good game until that. It's just when Andrei Vasilevskiy is the goalie that you're going up against, any mistake like that you make in your net is going to get magnified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you have that goaltender on the other side, you got to be perfect. So I know going into the playoffs, it was a bit 50-50, right? Peter Mrazek, and Alex. Do we continue with Nedeljkovic, or do we see maybe Mrazek next game or somewhere in this series?
I would not go to Mrazek for game two. I think Nedeljkovic – I'll be honest with you. I thought Nedeljkovic should have been the guy going into the playoffs, but I thought that Rod Brind'Amour might go with the veteran in Mrazek, but I think Nedeljkovic has been the guy for the Hurricanes really all year. I mean, he was their best goalie in the regular season. And in these playoffs, I mean, he was great in the first round against Nashville. He had, I think it was game 4 against Nashville. He let up not quite that bad, but kind of a bad goal and really bounced back and made a bunch of great saves the rest of that game. And he's shown an ability to do that. So, no, I think with everything that he's given you all season in this postseason. You don't, even though you do have a great second option in Mrazek, I don't think you go away from him immediately. I think you give him a chance to get right back in there and bounce back.
So we do go to the other end of the ice. And I know mid-series in the first round, some of them maybe were questioning the amazing Andrei Vasilevskiy, but he silenced them in Game 6 and in the first game of this series, allowing only a single goal in the last 6 periods with 67 shots. He seems to be a goaltender that can just raise that level to the next one when the games matter most. Right, Erik?
Yeah, and this will be interesting because I agree with Andrew. I think they should stick with Nedeljkovic because he was the better goalie, especially towards the latter half of the season. The one thing you do wonder, though, okay, that was a mistake that he made. And I think from watching it, I think he tried to seal the post and was off his mark. And you kind of look how that right pad swept through that area and completely threw him off balance. I think he expected to hit the post and seal that side of the net because that was the only area. It was actually Barclay Goodrow that had the shot. That was the only area that he could shoot at, right? So I think it was just a mistake. Now the question is, he is a rookie at the NHL level. He has won a championship in the Calder, in the AHL, the Calder Cup with Charlotte a couple years ago. So he has some big game experience. But then you wonder, does this affect him? And then you counteract that with the guy down at the other end who had to go through those growing pains himself. He was thrown into the 2015 Stanley Cup final because Ben Bishop was hurt. He suffered that injury in game number 2. He actually ended up picking up the win in game 2. And then he started in game number 4 against Chicago and was nervous. And he let in a goal that he probably wouldn't normally let in, but he was a rookie. And he had to shake that off. And I think as a goaltender, you have to learn those moments. You have to understand when to be able to push a goal aside, push it off, and just concentrate on the next one. And I don't know the mental makeup of Alex Nedeljkovic. He seems like he's pretty solid. He was really good, especially in those overtime games against Nashville in a very hostile environment, if you will. But that's where the veteran and a guy like Vasilevskiy now at the point of his career, like he's been through all that stuff, right? So he is as rock solid as they come. He can help you withstand, pardon the pun, a storm surge at the beginning of the first period like they did in game 1. And he can kind of keep you in those moments and then give your team, in this case the Lightning, a chance to kind of get their skates under him. But to me, that's the one area that Tampa Bay really has the advantage in this series is in the goaltending department.
I think you can, when you look at that Tampa Bay roster, there's so many players that you can kind of think of as an MVP type caliber player. Vasilevskiy, maybe even Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, and Victor Hedman. If you put one as the vital one that is totally the MVP to that roster, which one is it, Erik?
Well, it's easy, Vasilevskiy. I mean, you look at his numbers this year, his saves above expected goals is just off the charts compared to the rest of the league. And, he really kept the team involved in the early stages of the middle stages of the season. He was just so rock solid for them. But I think you can say that about a lot of teams and their goaltender, right? If you don't have a good goaltender, you probably don't have a team that's good enough to win it. So if we take the goalie out of the equation, the one guy that they can't afford to lose is Victor Hedman. Nobody plays the game on defense like Victor Hedman at 6'6", the way that he can skate, the way that he can control the ice at both ends, the way that he can make up ground. I mean, Rick Bowness always had the great line about him. He can beat out his own icing. That's how good he gets up the ice. If he's not in the lineup, and we know he's not at 100%, having said that, he logged 27 minutes and made a couple of key blocks in the final minutes of that game the other night. He still played 27 minutes. If he's not on the ice, it's a huge void, and you cannot replace it. Ryan McDonagh can elevate his game, but not to the level of Victor Hedman and then what it does for the rest of the defense. So Victor Hedman's the guy that they can least afford to lose.
And we saw that versus Columbus 2 years ago in the first round, right?
Yep.
All right, let's move over to the forwards a little bit now. Carolina has Sebastian Aho. He's second in the playoffs and first on his team with goals with 5. He's a dynamo. How has he even looked even better in these playoffs, Andrew?
I think he's just, part of it, it's kind of funny if you look at the first round. I don't know exactly what it is. Nashville is always kind of a team that Aho has had a knack for scoring against. Obviously, didn't play against them as often this year, but you look, he's tied. I think in his regular season career, Nashville is the team he's I think tied with against maybe Columbus the most goals against, and he's played more games against a lot of teams. So something about playing them, I genuinely don't know what it is. Seems to bring out the best in him. But two, I think for him, he's been, Erik talked about Victor Hedman. Sebastian Aho has been vital for this Hurricanes team all season. You look, Teuvo Teravainen, his partner in crime, the Hurricanes top playmaker, missed a ton of the regular season, and now he's back with him. So I think that's part of what you're seeing an increase in his game. But really, Andrei Svechnikov has been through slumps this year. Again, they missed Teravainen. So Aho has kind of been that one constant force for the Hurricanes all year. And if he doesn't play at the level he's been, this Hurricanes team, I think, does not accomplish nearly as much as it has this year.
Nikita Kucherov, oh man, I know a lot of fans and some media are clamoring about Tampa Bay circumventing the cap and obviously finding a loophole, not playing Kucherov till game one of the playoffs. And it obviously looked even worse when he did not look like he missed a step. Maybe the first shift or two, but of course the two big goals. But I don't know if a lot of people recall that Chicago did it exactly the same with Patrick Kane when they won. If this trend continues, Erik, does the league do anything? I know they haven't even thought about it, but do they kind of might do something if it continues with teams, letting a great player with a high cap hit stay off the season roster until the playoffs start, where the salary cap doesn't matter?
Well, let's make sure we're clear on one thing. Nikita Kucherov was injured. He had surgery. He had a hip surgery, and it's not an easy recovery hip surgery. Like I've talked to guys who have had this surgery. Braden Point had it. He missed more than 5 months. Yanni Gourde had it. He missed 4.5 months. That was during the summer off season, right? So there was time to recover from it. Even Mike Johnson, now with TSN, former NHLer, said that he had the same surgery, and he came back and he was skating with the team for like 6 or 7 weeks, and then the season ended. He was never able to get back in. So, a lot of eyes go up because Kucherov comes back and he's skating with the team in March. Oh, they're trying to cheat the cap. I mean, did they take advantage of the situation where they could keep a majority of their roster together because Nikita Kucherov was injured? Yes, but let's also be honest. No team wants a league MVP to have to sit out the entire regular season. And that's exactly what happened here. The 56-game season helped with that. Obviously, if this is a full 82, he's not missing the entire season. So there were certain things that kind of worked out, as it turns out, in their advantage. But when you insert a guy like him back into a lineup, and this is already a good team, but he's a big part of it. This is a team that finished first in scoring for 3 consecutive years. They dropped to 8th this year. Not a coincidence that it's because Nikita Kucherov was not in there. So, you miss him during the regular season, but you insert him back in this lineup come playoff time. I mean, he's a world-class player. He's probably a top 2 or 3 offensive player in this game. And just the dynamic of how he changes the power play, the dynamic of how he changes the top line, because now teams can't just focus on Braden Point. You have to respect Nikita Kucherov. And that was so evident in game 1 against Florida, where Kucherov gets the 2 power play goals, but it was his assist on the game tying goal, the Braden Point, that you just understood what he means, because Bobrovsky overplays the Kucherov shot. The defenseman slide over. Lo and behold, there's Braden Point right in the middle all alone for what was essentially a tap-in goal. All I had to do was make sure that puck was sent forward towards the net and it was going in. So he's obviously been a big boost to this lineup, and he changes how teams can defend Tampa Bay just because of his, he's a maestro. He has that knack. He can do things in this league again that maybe only a handful of players that are able to do. So huge boost, obviously, to have him back for the postseason.
I think I might have threw the question away and scared you off with the circumventing the cap. It's totally within the rules; they're allowed to do that. Yeah. But I do want to know
the Leafs. The Leafs were one of the teams that originally started to do this stuff, right? When they would acquire Nathan Horton, and they did it with Tampa Bay. They acquired Jamie Heward and Ole Kolzig one year simply to kind of help them out alleviate cap space. So it's been there for a long time. It's just Tampa Bay is a team that won last year, right? So everybody looks at it and says, well, they're kind of manipulating things. And look, they are.
Yeah.
But they're not doing anything no other team has done.
I did want to reiterate my question, though, is if it continues this trend of like superstars jumping in, do you see the NHL at all trying to stop that or anything?
I think this is more of a one-off than anything else. Because like I said, if this was a full 82-game season, it's a completely different situation. And look, they don't want to put a guy like Tyler Johnson through what they had to do because they knew that this cap issue was coming their way. Well, they tried to trade Tyler Johnson for 6 weeks. They placed Tyler Johnson on waivers. They placed him on waivers again at the start of the season, and it's had an effect on Tyler Johnson. So, I mean, there are other things that come into play, but I don't think this is going to be a huge issue going forward for the league because let's hope, knock on wood, we don't have a 56-game schedule. We get back to normal in the fall with 82 games, and then this is not going to be an issue because it would have to be a much more severe injury for a guy to miss the entire season.
I know you mentioned him already, but it always seems like Braden Point is slipping under the radar. He's leading the team in goals with 5. Why is he so deceptive at hiding under everybody's radar, Erik?
Well, because you have Nikita Kucherov, because you have Steven Stamkos, because you have Victor Hedman. I mean, you got guys who are just higher profile names. But all you got to do is look at Braden Point's production. Go back to 2 years ago when he had 40 goals and 90 points. That was kind of his coming out party a little bit. But he's elevated himself to number one center status on this team. He's bumped Steven Stamkos to the wing. That's the kind of game that he has. And I don't know why he doesn't get more attention because if you watch the way he plays the game, first of all, it's the high hockey IQ, something that the Lightning have done a very good job of drafting these type of players into their system. And the way that he can carry the puck up the ice, he's just so shifty. He's got good straight line speed, but he's got the ability to make moves. I mean, the goal he scored to basically clinch Game 6 against Florida, where he darts into the zone, he makes a quick move around Mackenzie Weegar, and then darts right back to his right, strong on his edges and that type of play. He just has that in his arsenal. And he's like an engine. He's kind of in a lot of ways like Marty St. Louis. He's an engine that drives this team with the way that he plays. He's not Nikita Kucherov. He's not flashy. He's not Steven Stamkos. He doesn't have the hammer of a shot. He just does so many things at such a high pace and a high speed. I think Sebastian Aho can kind of be that type of player with the way he plays the game. It's just Aho's the star on his team, right? Like he's kind of the big guy on Carolina, to where Braden Point is. If you're kind of counting down, maybe he's number 3 option if you think you have to stop, but he's more of a number 1 guy on most other teams.
The Lightning are favored by some, and some the Hurricanes. Andrew, I have the Lightning in 6. I know before, I think when everybody was looking at the first round with the Battle of the Sunshine State, I think people thought that was going to be, hell on wheels. And it was pretty exciting. It was a great series, but maybe Tampa would have been beat up a little bit more by the time they got to Carolina. How do you see this series playing out?
Yeah, well, I think, too, that they thought the Hurricanes probably wouldn't have quite as much trouble as they did getting through the Predators, who, kudos to them, were able to tie the series after a 2-game. The Hurricanes won the first 2 games and really find a way to do some things that frustrated the Hurricanes. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good series. I think, there's been the Hurricanes have lost to the Boston Bruins in each of the last 2 years in the playoffs. And after Game 1, especially in 2019 of each of those, you kind of felt like the Hurricanes have bitten off more than they can chew here. I did not feel that way after Game 1. I thought both teams played a very good game. I thought the Hurricanes very well could have won that game. I think not capitalizing on a lot of the chances that they got against Vasilevsky in the first period obviously hurt them. I think this is going to be a good, hard-fought series. I see it going 6 or 7 games. I Yeah, I think with the Lightning, just the depth and the experience and everything else and all of the star power that the Lightning have, it's going to be pretty tough for the Hurricanes, especially now that they have lost game one and lost home ice advantage to pull this out. But I would not be at all surprised to see the Hurricanes win the series either.
Erik?
I think it's two very evenly matched teams. And I can tell you, home ice does not necessarily favor Tampa Bay. I believe they're about a 500 team at home in the playoffs under John Cooper. They're actually fantastic on the road. They went 10-1 in road games last year. I know it was the bubble, but they were the visiting team. They went 10-1 in those games last year. But again, two very evenly matched teams, two teams that like to push the pace and play with pace, two teams that are deep. They can send four lines out at any time. I think actually depth-wise, I think Carolina actually has from 1 to 12 better forwards. But the high-end skill that Tampa Bay has, the Kucherovs, the Points, the Stamkos, even the Sorellis, the Killorns, I mean, the high-end guys, I think, are a little bit better than Carolina's high-end. I think Carolina's defense as a whole is deeper than Tampa Bay. But again, you've got Victor Hedman up there, even at 80%, whatever he's playing at, is such a difference maker in games. And then you come down to goaltending, and I think that's the one area that Tampa Bay has a pretty good advantage on, and we've already seen it in this series. He stood his ground in the first period. Nedeljkovic blinked in the third period, ended up being the difference in the game. So I think that's going to end up being the difference in this series. I think it's probably going to go 6 games, and I think Tampa Bay is going to find a way to come out on top just based on the star power and the advantage they have in net.
So they have such a well-rounded team and such a star-studded team. If you could pinpoint maybe a weakness in the chink of the armor of the Lightning, what would that maybe small weakness be, Erik?
You've already seen it a little bit because David Savard, who they picked up at the trade deadline from Columbus, has not played. He didn't play in game one. We're not sure what his status is. He was called day-to-day, so we'll have to see. But it's their depth on the right side. Because when they lost, especially if Erik Chernak can't play, and he obviously left, game one in the third period, he seems like he's going to be okay. But if you're missing Savard and Chernak, they have no depth left on the right-hand side. What they would actually have to do is take Mikhail Sergachev, who's playing third pair minutes on the left side, and move him over to the right to kind of take up some of those minutes. And then the other right-handed shots are Jan Ruda, Luke Schenn, and based on what we saw in practice, Fredrik Claesson, who's actually a left-handed shot. So if they start to lose some defensemen this series, I think that's going to be a big area of concern for Tampa Bay moving forward.
And that just reminds me of 2002 and the Canes going to the finals with a lot of damaged players, just like those Maple Leafs. Damn it. All right. Again, you can find them on Twitter at Erik_Erlendsson for Erik and at ASCHNITT53 for Andrew. Gentlemen, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
And in the West Finals, we're going to see some powerhouse teams. Joining us to discuss the Colorado Avalanche versus the Vegas Golden Knights are Ian St.Clair. He's the lead writer at Colorado Play. You can find the website playcolorado.com. And you can find Ian on Twitter at Ian St. Clair. Welcome back, Ian.
Good to be with you.
And, of course, also Jason R. Pothier. He writes for Sinbin Vegas. You can find him on Twitter at JR Pothier. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking some hockey. And this time last year we had nothing, so I'm glad to be talking some hockey at this point.
Yeah, well, I guess we still had a few more months to wait before the bubble started. So we will talk about this series. We are going to be making a little bit of picks at the end of how we think this series will go to, and check that out at the end of this segment. So game one, the Avalanche with that cascade of offense, 7-1. Oh, man, must be rough because Vegas obviously coming off an emotional 7-game series with the Wild. Peter DeBoer, that is, the coach, decided to start Robin Lehner. I thought it was a little peculiar, but I thought, it's an odd choice. but it's kind of like he's throwing him to the wolves and going, we might not win this game, so let's just throw in Leonard. He'll get emotional about this. He'll tweet about this, right? Won't he, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, normally, he's tweeting right away after games end and stuff like that. But I do agree with you. It was a peculiar move. He hadn't played in 3 weeks, and now you're throwing him up there against Colorado, against McKinnon. Whatever we saw defensively last night, this team, unfortunately, it was a tough matchup last night because, like you said, they did even use the excuse that they were coming off an emotional 7-game series. And not that they weren't prepared last night, but I think the odds were against them as soon as they decided to put Leonard in net. And I don't blame Leonard whatsoever.
What do you think was the thought process? Was it just, you know what, let's just throw this one away? Or it's like, let's change it up and go with Leonard? What was the thought process, do you think, for DeBoer?
Well, this goes back to even last year. So when they made the deal for Leonard, they were essentially saying this is the goaltender of the future. And, at first they said he was the backup to Marc-Andre Fleury, but as we watched last year in the bubble, it ended up being Leonard who got most of the games, if not, I think all of them except for 2. So this year, the plan was to rotate him, which they did. Leonard got injured, so Fleury was able to prove to himself that he is the starting goalie of this club. However, I still think DeBoer, in his mind, wanted to see Leonard in a position where he could prove himself that he could be the starter going forward. So at some point, I knew we would see Leonard. I just never thought it would be game 1 after such a long period being off. And against Colorado, it just didn't make much sense.
Yeah, that didn't make much sense. You know what else didn't make much sense? Maybe me bearing the lead a little bit here. The loss was a big one, but I don't know, man. Ryan Reeves was pretty vicious as well. He cross-checks Philip Grubauer in the side of the head, then punches and pulls Ryan Graves to the ice, where he kind of knees him while he's down. It's kind of like a police officer tying down and pinning a guy, trying to arrest a criminal. So I don't know what Revo thinks he's doing here, but he's not the law. The refs are the law, so they give him they give him misconduct. And in my opinion, that's not enough. I think this is similar to the Wilson incident, and I'm surprised there's no uproar there. And this is even worse. He should have got a fine or a game.
He's got 2.
Yeah,
he ended up getting 2 games.
Okay, he did. All right, good. I didn't see that. Good.
And you could argue that maybe it could have been more, but this is something when Ryan Reeves first came to Vegas. People expected what you saw last night, but over the period of time, he proved that he is very effective because he's clean. He does everything by the rule. And yes, he does toe the line, but he had never been suspended as a Golden Knight up until, I think it was last year against Vancouver. He was suspended in Game 7 against Vancouver, and that was a really tough spot there. Vegas, we know how they do in 5-minute majors in Game 7s. So this one worked out for him, luckily. But last night, I think he got ahead of himself, not ahead of himself. I'm pretty sure that the message was sent to him in between periods that it's time for you to now do your job. And I think Pete DeBoer put a little bit more emphasis on doing his job because we saw something out of Reeves last night that we don't normally see. And he did prove to people who thought he was dirty all along that he was. And last night was it was uncharacteristic because he usually can contain himself when he gets that emotional. But he didn't last night. Ian, you saw, there was nothing Graves could do. He knew that the entire team was going to be targeting him, especially in the third period. So I think Reeves let it get out of hand. And I put a little bit of blame on Pete DeBoer on that as well.
Ian, what's the update on Graves?
Graves, I don't think he should. I don't think he'll miss any time. I don't believe Bednar mentioned it in his news conference on Monday about whether or not Graves is going to miss any time. I do agree with Jason. I think the biggest problem that I have with this is from an NHL safety standpoint. You give Nazem Kadri 8 games for his hit, which is, I think, deserve it, right? Mm-hmm. But you have something that is not a part of the game. What Ryan Graves did, or what Ryan Reeves did, was not a part of the game. That's not NHL related. His sole intent was to hurt Ryan Graves, which is why he was given a match penalty. What I think everyone has a problem with is the inconsistency from the NHL safety. Why is it that sometimes, it's that running joke about, well, they're going to spin the wheel and we're going to find out whether or not it's a fine or if it's going to be like an 80-game suspension, because you just never know. That's the problem with all of this, is that the consistent inconsistency that we get from NHL safety. And it's just, that's my biggest problem with it. 2 games, okay. Nazem Kadri getting 8. Okay. Reeves not getting anything for that hit on Ryan Suter in game 7. That's where I start to have a problem with it, is the inconsistency. It's not the players, because the whole point of NHL safety is to protect the players, to have a safety protocol in place. And when you have that inconsistency, it makes it very difficult to know what the line is, what's going to happen from each player, from Tom Wilson to Nazem Kadri to Reeves. What is the protocol here? What is going to happen when something happens? And we just don't know. It's always that guess of, well, they're going to spin the wheel.
And again, if it's in playoff time, a little bit here, a little bit there, it's fine. I know in the last Leaf game in overtime, I believe it was either Petrie or Sherratt. I think it was Sherratt, and he blindsided. And you can take a look at the hit on Galchenyuk, and his head whips back. He's on the ice. He gets up pretty quick. So there's not a penalty. It is overtime, and there's nothing recalled. But if you compare that hit to the Nazem Kadri hit, the only difference is, 1 is Nazem Kadri, and number 2, the player is not down on the ice and done, just like Falk. So I don't like when you're spinning that wheel and it's always a certain type of player, or it's what happened to the player. Is he injured or is he not? And we're not basing it on the action, we're basing it on the result.
And so you mentioned Kadri. So obviously Kadri has a resume. He has a reputation. So does Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson isn't exactly going to be up for the Lady Byng anytime soon, right? I mean, so you have players with reputations, but it's that inconsistency again. When you do have players with a reputation, they're treated differently. That's where it gets so maddening from the fans' perspective. They just want consistency, whether it's Major League Baseball with umpiring, whether it's the NBA with that generations long argument about officiating, the NFL, anything with officiating and holding referees to account. It's about consistency. And that's just not in place now with the National Hockey League.
And the other thing is, what is the history? What means that Kadri has more of a history than Reeves? And I know that he's been more suspended, but because Reeves, up until last year, was known as a very clean player. I mean, he was, again, very dangerous. He's out to hurt people, but he's doing it in a fashion that is within the rules. Last night definitely was not. In game 7 last year against Vancouver, he was not. And like you said about game 7, that against Minnesota, that hit on Suter was a dangerous hit, and it could have been called either way. They didn't call it a major, I think, because they thought that the game was physical as it was, but that could have been called a major. So as fans and people that cover the sport, we need to know what is the criteria of having history, of having a past history. Is it just because Kadri was out more games in last year's postseason, or is it because of more incidents? That's what I think confuses fans a lot as well.
The other thing that I'll mention before we move on is we obviously saw that Reeves was issued a match penalty with intent to injure. Then it somehow gets replaced, and it's not called a match penalty from NHL safety anymore. It's called a roughing and interference. And the match is just completely whitewashed. It's not even mentioned now. So that's something else. Where is the explanation for that? He was obviously assessed a match penalty. Why is the NHL now referring to it just as a roughing and an interference penalty? That's something else. Where is the logic or the explanation behind these decisions?
I can clear that up just a little bit. So the referees went over to Colorado's bench and said, he had intent to injure. Those words exactly. So at that point, now we know that the league will get involved and they will decide if it's going to be 1, 2, or more games. So they use that wording alone just to make sure that there would be further investigation or whatever you want to call it. So that's why Landeskog after the game used that phrase, and so did Bednar. So they were both using that phrase. They never called it dirty. They never called it anything other than intent to injure. And I think that's why the referees used it. So now they put it in place with, player safety, which at this point, when you talk about player safety, almost leveling down the punishment, they were doing that so they didn't have to give him 8 games. I think they were doing that to give him right around 2 games or less, because if you leave that language in there, he has to get, I believe, a minimum of 3 and probably more.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for the explanation and the detail on that.
It's all confusing. So, you know what I mean? It's just, all of this is a mess. But the good thing is the referees, believe it or not, they had a handle of last night's game. Other than the third period, for the most part, last night was a well-officiated game.
There you go. They're like, the PR team, thank you for handing us the game sheet, and it's intent to injure, PR, thanks. Now we know Bednar, Landeskog, we know the wording, intent to injure, thank you, PR. The PR team helps them with the players and the management get prepared properly for the post-game. I love NBA players now. Every time at a press conference, it's like, 18 blocks and 4 for 7 and shooting at the 3-point. They're looking up and down at the stat sheet as they're doing their post-game presser. So anyways, I just love that. Hilarious. So the NHL is slowly getting into that. The Avs, though, have been steamrolling in these playoffs so far, sweeping the Blues and, of course, winning a big in Game 1 versus the Golden Knights. Ian, if they hit a wall, which they haven't hit a wall all season. I think they have only 17 losses if you include overtime and 44 wins, including the playoffs and regulation. And if they've lost, I think there was 1 game stretch where they had 3 losses in a row. So they haven't really hit a wall. I'm scared of that thing. Just like Tampa Bay in previous years. When you hit that wall, how do they respond? And how do you think they will respond if they do hit that wall?
So I think they did hit the wall the last 2 years, where they were in the Game 7 against San Jose, and Landeskog gets called for that phantom offsides call. They hit the wall last year in the bubble against Dallas. So they've hit the wall. This is a team that I think has the confidence now, and they have the experience to know what the playoffs are about. And I think when I did your show to preview the season, I said the biggest acquisition that Joe Sakic made for the Avalanche was the addition of Brandon Saad, because of that playoff grit and experience that he had with the Blackhawks to win 2 Stanley Cups with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. To have that experience, and now that's in the locker room, on top of Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and you have Landeskog and McKinnon and Rantanen now having playoff experience, and the disappointment of hitting that wall against the Sharks and the Stars, they know what's coming. They're prepared for the adversity. And the fact that they didn't really hit a wall in the regular season, despite having 2 COVID protocols where they didn't play and they've had injuries, they've just kept being an Avalanche, to steal that reference, as opposed to a steamroller, and to be cliche. But they have the experience now, and they have the confidence. They know that Vegas is going to respond in Game 2. That's why I was impressed with the way Landeskog handled the press conference after Game 1, saying, all right, fine, it's a great win, but we haven't done anything yet. That's what I like from this team, is that they know they haven't done anything yet, because the last 2 years they were expected to win and they didn't. The expectations of themselves, they expected more, and they had to deal with that disappointment and that sour taste of losing. So I think they know Vegas is going to come out and be better on Wednesday. They have finally a couple of days to put that Minnesota series behind them, and now put this Game 1 behind them, to where they're going to be better. Whether or not it'll be enough, I don't know, but they will be better.
The only question is, and I agree with you, Vegas will come out and they'll play better. And again, Fleury will be in net. There's no doubt in anybody's mind. DeBoer normally doesn't like to tell which goalie's going to be in net. He considers that a little bit of a competitive advantage. I think most people disagree with that. Even Landeskog last night, when somebody asked him, hey, you might see Fleury in game 2. And he said, we don't care. We don't care which goalie's in net. But I agree with you. I think that Vegas will come out really well because that's what they've done. Anytime they've played a stinker, they come out and play strong the next game. However, in the postseason, they can't score. They haven't been able to score in 2 years in the postseason. So, all the 5-goal games they put up in the regular season really mean nothing when they come into now they're playing Colorado, even a bigger offense than what Minnesota was. So even if Colorado hits a skid, I still don't see Vegas outscoring them 3-4 games in a row. I mean, I really don't. It would be hard to tell me that they're going to shut out Colorado 2 or 3 games this series. I just don't see that happening. So in one way, I agree with you, but I worry about, can Vegas stop what Colorado's going to bring? Because let's be honest, Colorado's probably going to score 2 minimum.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes this team so different now, is that even if DeBoer and the Golden Knights put all of their focus on that McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog line, now you have depth scoring where they haven't had it the last couple of years. Now you have Brandon Saad with Donskoy and Burakovsky. You now have a third line that's JT Compher and Ryan Jost and all these other guys now that are going to be able to start scoring goals and filling in, even if McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen maybe don't have a game like they've had the last 5 games. I mean, they have just been incredible to start the playoffs. Can that continue? I don't know, but I think McKinnon is just on a different level right now. And the way he and Cale Makar are playing, it takes the team to a whole nother level. But even if you stop that line, now you still have depth scoring that they haven't had the last couple of years. So I agree with Jason that even if Colorado hits a wall, and they're not going to score 7 goals again. I mean, as fun as this team is, I don't think you can expect them to score 7 goals. But it's going to be difficult to not only stop them, but keep up with what the Avalanche do offensively.
Definitely.
Speaking about taking it to another level, Cale Makar, he's been a little bit quiet so far, especially in that first round versus the Blues, but he came guns blazing in game 1 of the second round. Goal, 3 assists, +4. But have we untapped everything there is to offer from game maker Makar? How much more does he have to grow, Ian?
Oh, I don't even think we've seen anywhere near what Cale Makar is capable of. I mean, the fact that he has come out like he has to score a goal in his first ever NHL game and it's in the playoffs. I mean, this kid is insane. I mean, he's basically Nathan McKinnon as a defenseman. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Joe Sakic has both of them is crazy. And as much as I think Nathan McKinnon is the best player in the world right now, because unlike Connor McDavid and some of these other guys, McKinnon shows up in the playoffs. He just takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, when you're on a list with Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and Bobby Hull with, I mean, goals scored in the first 8 games, averaging over close to 1.5 points per playoff game. When you're on that kind of list, but I still don't think we've seen the best out of Nathan McKinnon yet either. So who knows what's possible with Cale Makar? I think the thing when you have athletes like that, they're driven. They know that they can just go to another level and they're never going to be satisfied. So as great as Cale Makar is, who knows how much better he can get.
Plus, he's a former Minuteman. So anybody that goes to the University of Massachusetts has my support. So,
Jason, you were talking about offense and Vegas needs it. I did think that getting Max Pacioretty back was a big boost for Vegas, and it seemed like it went to Mark Stone's confidence as well. I think he plays a little bit more confident when he's there. Is Max 100%? And do you see now Stone with Pacioretty kick it into another gear, having his partner back?
Well, I do not think he's 100%. And I think we'll all notice that throughout the series. But as we know, we've seen Max play enough in the postseason that he'll give it his all and he'll score. Max finds a way to score, and that's what they desperately needed in the first 6 games against Minnesota. They bring him back game 7. He scores the game winner. So, of course, it's important to have him out there. Now, there's a scary trend between Stone and Pacioretty. In the first few games of a series, and we've seen this now for 3 years in a row, they just unload. They are the best offensive line in that series. Games 5, 6, and 7, they combined, they score under a point per game. So we're looking at a situation where they get hot early, but they need to come out late in the later part of the series. And unfortunately, if the games continue to go, like you said, Ian, it's not going to be a 7-1 game. But if they continue to be outshot and outscored by Colorado, I don't think it matters down 5, 6, and 7 what Stone and Pacioretty do, because they need to outscore Colorado. And I find that really, really difficult at this moment.
I think the big thing that would help Las Vegas in that situation is to have Marchessault and Karlsson step up to help take the pressure off of Pacioretty and Stone. Because that's one of the, I mean, we mentioned the depth with the Avalanche. As great as McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog have been through the first 5 playoff games, they've gotten depth scoring on top of that. I mean, the fact that the Avalanche have won every playoff game they've played by at least 3 goals is crazy. That is insane that they have won their 5 playoff games by an average of 3 goals. That's just unheard of. But I think what will help Vegas is to have Marchessault and Karlsson, like I said, step up, Tuck, helping out Stone and Pacioretty to where they're not having to produce and be the offense like so many times they may need to be.
And I'll add one in here. They need Alex Pietrangelo to show up. I mean, he hasn't all season. This is not a secret out here in Las Vegas. It's been a bad deal so far. He's getting paid $8.8 million, and he just can't keep up. He's not good defensively, and offensively, he has not added much. He didn't add anything in Minnesota. And I know people, if they're watching, they're probably saying, hey, Shea Theodore hasn't done much either. I agree. I'm there with you. But when you bring in an $8.8 million star defenseman, which we all thought Pietrangelo was coming into this year, and he's not adding anything in big games and in the postseason, it's a very concerning issue right now. And if you can't get anything out of those 2 defensemen, I just don't. And you mentioned Alex Tuck. If you're not getting something from all 3 of those players consistently, there's no way they can outscore Colorado.
Before we make our picks, goaltending in this series, it's an interesting one. First, we'll go to Grubauer. He seems like he's really underrated. He seems like it could be Colorado's Chris Osgood. Am I off on this, or is it a good pinpoint there? Yeah.
You could go with Vernon or Osgood to go back into the well for the Avalanche and Red Wings rivalries. I don't disagree with you, because I think everyone coming into the season, the biggest question mark was goaltending, because they wanted to know why Joe Sakic didn't go out and perhaps get a better goalie. Well, now we know why. He trusted Philip Grubauer. When I look back at the bubble against Dallas, the fact that they had their 3rd string goalie playing and they were still in contention, I mean, to be up with 3 minutes left, and I don't want to bring a nightmares back to Avalanche fans, but to then lose the series, I think Grubauer has been the biggest surprise. Not his play, but the fact that he has been so good. I mean, he's up for the Vezina Trophy. He's in the Vezina Trophy conversation. I don't think he will win it, but that's huge. I mean, you have the offense, you have the defense. No one questioned any of that coming into the season, but to have the goaltending now, where you have a guy who can be on par with Marc-Andre Fleury or Robin Lehner, even though it'll probably be Fleury in game 2, to now have that piece just adds to the confidence of this team.
And on the other side of the ice, you already mentioned him, another kind of rebirth, it just seems like he has 9 lives and he keeps on playing even better to his long career. Very possible to win the Vezina. Marc-Andre Fleury has continued his outstanding season well into the playoffs. How does he keep on getting better almost every other year or every year?
I think he feels like he needs to. I really do. In year one, when they made that miraculous run to the Stanley Cup, I mean, he was the reason, all season long. He was just the anchor. They could always rely on him, and they did in the postseason. And year two, it was just a really tough 7-game series against San Jose. It wasn't that he had or great. It was just he was steady. But overall, we know what happened. Game 7, major penalty, whatever. It's just, that's Vegas fans' first shot in the arm, as a professional, team that comes in, and that's we'll always remember that, right? But last season, I think when he was demoted, I think we can all agree he was demoted. It really fired him up. We saw what happened with his agent coming out and making a big deal about it. Over the summer, he kept hearing his name being out there, being traded. He really was motivated by that. And when he came in this season, he said, if I'm only going to be getting half the load, I'm going to win as many of those games as I can. And he did. And there were games that he stood on his head, and there were games that Vegas probably shouldn't have won, but he did. And this year, when he started game 1 all the way through game 7 against Minnesota, he's been really steady and solid. And I know the team won't tell you this, but they play more confident behind him. And it has nothing to do with Leonard. It's just they've been there. They've been to war with Fleury so many times that they know exactly what they're getting, and they can really get confident and play really strong behind him. Last night was not one of those games, obviously, because he wasn't in net, but they didn't play well. It wouldn't have mattered if Fleury was in that net or not. They were losing that game.
I have the Avs in 6. Ian, what do you have?
I want to say 6. I don't know. I don't know if Vegas has the scoring ability or the scoring depth to keep up with the Avs. So I think it could be 5, but I'll go on the safe side since I'm in the sports betting business. I'll go with this. I'll hedge my bet a little bit and go with 6.
Yeah, I'm there with you guys as well. I mean, I opened up the series thinking Vegas would at least force a game 7, right? I really believe that. Not that last night was the end all be all, because realistically, a home team is only looking for one game in that first 2 splits. So I wasn't concerned with the loss. It was just a matter of how easy it was for Colorado to score when Vegas was still in the game. So like you said, Ian, I just don't believe that Vegas has enough offensive power to be able to outscore them. And I mean, Vegas can't score 3 on average against Minnesota. How are they going to do that against Colorado? And even more than that, how are they going to stop Colorado and have them score less than 3? I just don't see it happening.
And again, you can find them on Twitter at JR Pothier for Jason and at Ian St.Clair for Ian. Thank you for stopping by, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Peter.
I want to thank our guests today, Andrew Schnittke, Jason Pothier, Ian St.Clair, and Erik Erlendsson. It was great having them all on to analyze these fun series. Remember, if you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode, or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can also contact us on our website. You can use the hashtag at Jablam Sports, Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM, and our website is jablamsports.com/contact for our contact page there. Please check out our website. Go to jablamsports.com to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode, including this one. And you'll get our guests' info and links to things we mentioned on this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Also, follow us on our Facebook group, Jablam Sports. Check us out, folks. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.